Welcome, everybody. It's New Year's Eve. This is sort of the Mormon Newscast. This is sort of Mormonism Live. But tonight, it is December 31st, 2025. It is the Mormon Newscast year in review. It was RFM's idea for us to do this on New Year's Eve, which I think is certainly appropriate. RFM, do you want to say anything about our missing cohort, Rebecca Biblioteca?
Yes, Rebecca Biblioteca is supposed to be here, but she's apparently returning from her travels that she's been on for the last week or two, going to different church history sites, and I'm sure she'll regale us with lots of great stories about that trip in the future. But she has just landed at the airport, and she is whizzing through traffic as we speak, trying to get to her studio, which she expects to arrive at in, I don't know, I'd say 10 to 15 minutes. I don't want to hold her to anything. Now, she's already part of the live chat, and what she has said is Happy New Year's, everybody. My plane just landed, and I'm racing home to jump on the newscast. You all need to keep RFM and Bill in line until I can get there.
And by the way,
yes.
And by the way, when she says that, she means keep RFM in line until she gets there.
What do you mean?
Well, that's how I feel about it. All right, let's just jump into it.
What a scurrility!
I know.
You've impugned me, good sir. Impugned me, I say.
Sue me. All right,
a lawyer and sue me. Sue me.
Here is the thumbnail. This is top Mormon news stories of 2025. Again, this is the top stories that were shared throughout the year on the Mormon Newscast. And we wanted to start, by the way, with breaking news this week, the passing of Elder Holland. And so I'll share a little bit here from this. RFM's got a fun little image. Again, it's a funeral, so it's not that fun, but a fun little image of a person that we know at the funeral doing some singing. And then a little clip that I think does deserve some discussion. So let me jump into it. We'll take a few minutes here. And I think by the time we're done talking about this story, Rebecca will be here. When news came of Elder Jeffrey R. Holland's passing, my first reaction was complicated. For a long stretch of my life, he mattered to me. He mattered to a lot of us. He was funny, warm, quotable, and emotionally accessible in ways that many church leaders were not. And his talk showed up right when faith felt heavy and answers felt thin. At least for me, that was true. Safety for the soul. Lord, I believe. Lessons from Liberty Jail. Remember Lot's wife, because I had a MP3 player early in my time in the church, and I would go into the websites for BYU Idaho, and other places, and I would download these talks that were given there. And I had certain speakers that I connected with. Believe it or not, Brad Wilcox early on was one of those. And Elder Jeffrey R. Holland was one of those who stood out. And I had a bunch of his talks saved on my MP3 player. And I would listen to some of them more than once, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. These weren't just sermons for me. They were handholds. And when my shelf was starting to sag, Elder Holland was one of the voices I leaned on to keep believing that the church still deserved my faith and my loyalty. And that's what makes the latter years so disorienting, because somewhere along the way, a different Elder Holland emerged, as well as the previous Elder Holland was exposed. Not a defender of the marginalized, not a courageous truth teller, but a deeply loyal company man. One willing to shade, bend, or outright misstate the truth when the institution was threatened. And that shift didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't obvious at first, but once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. Take the story of the Book of Mormon he claimed to hold. The copy said to have been the very copy that belonged to Bathsheba Smith, from which Hiram Smith read shortly before his death. The very corner of the page turned down to mark the spot. It's a powerful image in conference of him holding that book, but the problem is that book that Elder Holland held up in General Conference is not the same book identified by the Church History Department as that artifact. Different condition, different fold on the corner of the page. That's not a simple mistake. That's a faith-promoting narrative trumping verifiable fact. Then there was Prop 8. When directly asked about the church's financial involvement, Elder Holland said the church gave not one red cent. That sounds clear. It wasn't true. The church contributed close to $200,000, whether in cash or in-kind support. That's quite a few red cents. Some want to argue semantics, but when a senior apostle draws a bright rhetorical line like that, precision matters. Finding loopholes after the fact doesn't restore credibility, it erodes it. Or the missionary story about the estranged elder brother, told for years by Elder Holland as evidence of divine orchestration. The details changed with each telling, the timeline didn't hold, and the unlikely events strained credulity. And exactly when RFM and I began asking reasonable questions about this narrative, the church quietly backed away from the story. Elder Holland retracted it, but rather than pointing to the escalating voices asking questions, he said that the family had come to him and told him that that story wasn't true and that he needed to stop telling it. Wasn't that convenient? Even Elder Holland's explanation of how he came to know that the story wasn't true raises questions of dishonesty, and another faith-promoting tale collapsed. Add to this his public denial that Mitt Romney would have made temple penalty oaths something that absolutely existed during Romney's temple years, or his 2015 claim that the church was creating double-digit new stakes every week of our lives when the church's own published numbers showed an average of 1.6 per week during that period. Maybe he was counting the number to the right of the decimal. Maybe those are the loopholes that apologetics require. These aren't the fuzzy memories or debatable interpretations. They are demonstrably false statements. And at some point, the pattern matters. And then there was the anger, the scolding, the talk where those who leave often years of trying to make it work were mocked as taffy pullers, foolish, weak, and even dumb. Don't you dare leave. I am so furious, he said. That wasn't pastoral care. That was institutional fear dressed up as conviction. It landed hard on people who had already given everything they had and were bleeding on the floor. What makes this especially personal is that I wasn't a distant observer. I wrote Elder Holland while serving as a bishop, explaining my faith crisis honestly and respectfully. He put me in touch with Marlon Jensen, who was the church historian at the time. Elder Holland and I communicated both by phone and email more than once each, talking at length about my doubts and questions. I met him once at a regional conference. When I introduced myself, he smiled, reached out, gently tugged my earlobe, and said, "The famous Bill Reel," which at the time I was in the depth of despair and a faith crisis that was getting worse by the moment. In that moment, I felt seen. That moment captured what people loved about him, his warmth, his ability to connect. And yet, when I was excommunicated for publicly calling out these very falsehoods, he did nothing. Not to correct the record, not to protect the truth teller, not to accept responsibility. The lying leader is protected by the institution. The whistleblower was cut loose. So yes, I can hold both truths at once. Elder Holland was beloved for real reasons. His talks helped people survive the dark night of the soul. But in the end, he was no different from other so-called apostles. See what I did there? Who chose the institution over their own integrity. Kindness that stops where accountability begins is not courage. Empathy that collapses under institutional pressure is not Christ-like leadership. And if I'm being honest, my final word isn't reverent or sentimental. It's a clear, unapologetic goodbye to a man who asked for loyalty while withholding honesty and who demanded faith from others while quietly betraying it himself. And that's the passing of Elder Holland that happened this week. RFM, your thoughts on that, and then I'll let you go to the next picture and share anything you want to say.
Can I ask you a couple of questions?
Please.
First off, if we can put that back on the screen just for a second.
Yeah.
I wanted to. Is this image legit?
Yeah.
Is this your way of saying yes?
Yeah. This is the document right here. So when I got done talking to Marlin Jensen for about an hour in my driveway, crying my heart out, telling Elder Jensen the details of my faith crisis, Marlin didn't have an answer to a single question I had. His response was the old adage of just have faith, we'll figure it out on the other side, which to somebody who is pretty sure the church isn't true, recognizes, even if you don't have the label for it yet, recognizes that that's just a thought-stopping technique designed to get you to stop asking the questions. And when I got done with that conversation, I asked Marlin Jensen, because he said, Elder Holland reached out to me, wrote me a little note, asked me to reach out to you. And I said, do you still have that little note? And he said, yes. And I said, would you please send that to me? And he mailed me this with a little handwritten note, again, expressing his empathy for me being in a faith crisis. But again, he didn't have any answers to the question. So yes, what you see there on the right is the card that Elder Holland sent to Marlin Jensen requesting that he reach out to Bishop Rio, me, when I was in the depths of a faith crisis.
Is that about 5x7? Because it's not letter size, is it?
No, it's a little bit bigger than an index card.
Okay. That's why I didn't say 3x5. I went a little bit bigger, maybe 4x6.
Yep. I would say.
Can you read that for the audience so that we can hear it? And is that a signature that says Jeff at the bottom?
It is a signature that says Jeff. The date is February 23rd, 2012 to Elder Marlin K. Jensen. It's a memo. It says in the top right corner, memo from Jeffrey R. Holland. The attached letter was received in my office a little over 1 week ago while I was on assignment in Africa. Would you be good enough to handle, as you feel appropriate, this letter from Bishop William J. Reel, who is currently serving as bishop in the Sandusky Ward in Ohio? Please express to him my love and best wishes. Tell him I would respond personally were it not for other demands, including a grueling trip to Africa. I'm concerned about such people. Signed, Jeff. So there was a time when he was so helpful. His talks, his reaching out to me. About 3 or 4 weeks after I talked to Elder Jensen, Elder Holland called me. So I talked to him on the phone as well. And I had a chance to correspond with Elder Holland, where he seemed to be sincerely asking for suggestions on how the church could do better. I'll simply say that very little of that turned into things that were put into actual efforts of the church to do something. He told me that the gospel topic essays were on the way. Of course, this was 2012, so we're about a year shy, maybe 8 months shy of that. He notified me that what they originally had planned was that you could read a really brief write-up of any of those issues, and then you could click see more, and then it would open up like a 3-page thing. And if you still weren't satisfied, you could click see more, and then it would open up like a 20-something page or 30-page, which makes a lot of sense when you look at people like Paul Reeve and the kind of documents they were asked to write that seemed to be the original format, at least in part of the gospel topic essay, and then the church deciding that wasn't going to be as helpful because it was going to expose the problems more prevalently. And so they went with something that took, for instance, what Paul Reeve wrote and then condensed it, had folks from within the inside of the church who are protecting the narrative condense Paul Reeve's work, and then certain essays choose phrases like several months shy of her 15th birthday.
Which no one has yet taken credit for. Everybody who's spoken on the issue has said, I was in the committee, but I had nothing to do with that line.
And when someone says, let's word it several months shy of her 15th birthday, they're already self-admitting they are troubled by a 14-year-old marrying the prophet Joseph Smith. The trouble was Elder Holland's words were hollow, that the moment you push back and go, I'm sorry, but your answers are not solving the problem, and I'm not going to stop raising my hand and asking the questions. And if you give bad answers, I'm going to notify the public that you're giving bad answers. Then you become an enemy of the church. And in the process of becoming an enemy of the church and meeting with my stake president often, as everyone well knows, it's documented based on the episodes that I did and the conversations that you and I had at the time and talked about these things out loud. But Elder Holland lied. You can take those 5 and maybe you can explain one of them away, but he's still a liar on 4 occasions. And when you're the whistleblower, when you're the one drawing attention to the church leaders lying, and it's you, the whistleblower, who is not allowed to be whistleblowing, but the leader's allowed to not only lie, but he never has to step forward and say, I'm sorry, you're right, you caught me, I lied. Or at least step forward and explain what details were missing so that we can make sense of it. Then you recognize who this church protects and who it doesn't.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, guess who was seen at the funeral of Elder Holland today? There was an Elvis sighting. There's actually 2. It's either Elvis or Bigfoot. But we've got pictures from 2 different angles, so it definitely happened. And this, I think, is Jim Bennett, who I hope is watching, if not his whole family. And the reason I took these pictures is mainly because I look for him, and he's told me he's hard to find because usually the cameras, because he's in the very back row, that the cameras seldom get up that high. Usually they'll cut off and go somewhere else before they get to him, even if they're moving in his direction. And not once, but twice, we got splendid images of Jim Bennett on the back row singing at the funeral service for Elder Holland today. Anyway, I wanted to share that with you. And I also send them to him so that he can enjoy them as well.
Yeah, good old Jim Bennett. Kudos to him. And I know he really loves being in the choir. And again, not that, funerals are sad and they're a down moment, but what a cool thing for him to be able to honor his church leader by being in that choir and singing.
Yes. And he texted me back. He appreciated the images. So I was listening to the funeral off and on today, and there came a point at the end where President Oaks spoke, and I was listening to him, and he's saying all the normal things that one would say at a funeral. I mean, he's known the man for over 50 years, and they're friends. But then all of a sudden, he kind of went off the tracks, as far as I could tell. I did a double take. And I'm just, alone in the studio. And I went, what? What are you doing? You don't do this at a funeral. Didn't you get the memo? So it's about a minute and a half, and you're going to play it here. We got the clip. And I just want to know what the audience thinks about it. Okay. Maybe it's me. Maybe this is totally fine. But I think I get an insight into the character of Elder Oaks that maybe I didn't have before.
The sequence of our professional and church leadership was closely related. In the first years of my presidency at BYU, I hired him from a staff position at church headquarters to be the dean of the College of Religion at BYU. I was his president. He was my teacher. There were many things that a new president of BYU needed to change. I wanted to establish that women professors could teach the fundamental Book of Mormon course. And I also wanted to establish that faithful teachers in other colleges of the university could do the same. Neither of those changes could have been accomplished without his leadership, coupled with my initiative and support.
Screech. That's like the old record player in the needle going, screech. What happened there? Did nothing happen? Is this all just a figment of my imagination?
You and I were talking before the show. There's some strange things that are said there. I'll let you expound on them and then I'll comment, but I'm curious to see if people notice the same thing in the chat before we sort of say our thoughts out loud.
Can we play the last 30 seconds? Because he's introducing it a bit, and if you just go halfway through, then that's fine. But the first thing I notice is why all of a sudden, usually at a funeral, you're saying nice things about the person who's dead, not about yourself. That was the first thing, the first breach of decorum that I noticed.
The sequence of our professional end of BYU needed to change. I wanted to establish that women professors could teach the fundamental Book of Mormon course. And I also wanted to establish that faithful teachers in other colleges of the university could do the same.
I still don't know what that means.
Neither of those changes could have been accomplished without his leadership, coupled with my initiative and support.
Oh my gosh. It gets worse every time I see it.
Yeah, first he says, the first part is that he wanted female teachers at the university to be able to teach the introductory
fundamental
Mormon
course. The fundamental one.
And he wanted worthy, again, I don't know what his exact verbiage was, but worthy professors at other universities
other colleges within the university. Other colleges at BYU.
To be able to do so as well. And it's confusing because is he saying he wants both male and female professors at the school to be able to teach the fundamental Book of Mormon class? Or is he saying that he wants other female professors at other parts of the school to be able, I don't know what he was trying to convey there.
I don't either. Maybe he's talking about BYU, Hawaii. I don't know. But there you have it. There you have it. And so it's just like me, and I've rarely seen, let's put it this way, as a guy who's raised 5 kids, you see a lot, but I've rarely seen so obvious and transparent an attempt to talk about someone else at their funeral when you are using them in order to cast the spotlight on yourself. It was really quite remarkable. And if we can agree to that, and if you can't, then that's fine. If you see it differently, it's fine. It seems glaringly obvious to me. But once you get to that point, if you can see that or consider that, then you can ask the question, why are you saying this in this venue? President Oaks, what is going on?
You and I were talking about this. He's old. He's frail. He doesn't have long to go. And as you mentioned before the show started, when we were chatting, he has a long ways to go at his age, a long ways to go before he gets a chance to put his stamp on the church as the prophet of the church, speaking as the prophet of the church. That's April. And at his age, April, he could die 3 times between now and then.
Yes, he should not be buying any green bananas.
So, and I'll play it one more time here after we sort of chat about this, but he said he tells a story about Elder Holland being hired by him. He's Elder Holland's president. Elder Holland is his teacher. And it's a perfect moment then to go down the track of praising Elder Holland for all that he did. Instead, he informs that what he wanted to accomplish at the university was that he wanted to make sure that women at the school female teachers could teach the fundamental Book of Mormon class. And then he says this next sentence, which maybe he's saying the same thing a second time. I'll let other folks decide now that they know the context. But he says something like, and I wanted other professors in the schools at the university to be able to do so as well. But that's sort of what he just said before that. Yeah. So then we're left going like, what the hell
is this to do so that you're talking about here?
Yep. And then he's already told you that that's his initiative. And then he says that couldn't have happened without Elder Holland's leadership. When Elder Holland is the underling of Elder Oaks.
Yes.
And then Elder Oaks follows it up after he's already told you this was his agenda and his initiative. He says something, it was done with Elder Holland's leadership and my initiative and
coupled with my initiative and support.
And I think I see a smirk on his face when he's talking about himself.
Mm-hmm. We should replay that just to see about the smirk, by the way. Yes.
We will.
He's kind enough to give himself first and final billing in telling the story too.
By the way, there's no need to tell people that this happened with your initiative and support. Number one, if it's your initiative, of course you support it. It's your fucking excuse my language. It's your initiative. Sorry. It's your initiative. It's ridiculous that you also are supporting your initiative.
Well, he gets more words than Elder Holland did because he did more.
And number two, he did two things and Elder Holland did one.
Exactly. Like leadership, his leadership, and my initiative and support.
And he's already told you it's his initiative before. Then he congrats Elder Holland on his leadership. And then he tells you a second time, it's my initiative. Here it is.
It was a spectacular performance.
The sequence of our professional and church leadership was closely related. In the first years of my presidency at BYU, I hired him from a staff position at church headquarters to be the dean of the College of Religion at BYU. I was his president. He was my teacher. There were many things that a new president of BYU needed to change. I wanted to establish that women professors could teach the fundamental Book of Mormon course. And I also wanted to establish that faithful teachers in other colleges of the university could do the same. Neither of those changes could have been accomplished without his leadership, coupled with my initiative and support.
Did you see it again?
I saw all of it again.
Did you see the smirk as you described it?
Yeah, I could watch it again and we could pause it at the moment. It wasn't.
I wish we had, because I think I missed it.
It wasn't at the begin. It wasn't at the end after he had said everything. It was as he was transitioning from talking about Elder Holland's leadership to his initiative and support.
Yes. I've got to ask you a question. The next story. Oh, Jana Taylor says, I saw the smirk. Well, in the mouths of two or three witnesses shall every smirk be established.
It's a gospel law. If there are two witnesses, it must be true.
Absolutely. So guess what? Is the next story in the lineup? Is that Rebecca's?
So there is, no, I don't think so. Let me put this back up.
I just want to make sure we weren't spending all this time here on this one video clip just because the next story is Rebecca and she hasn't turned up yet.
Yeah. So what we've done now is we're transitioning, and hopefully Rebecca's here any moment. Let me my phone just dinged. So I just want to make sure it's not Rebecca, and it is. She's messaging something. So let me really quickly check and see what that's about.
Can you read it on air?
On in about 6. So 6 minutes. I'm going to skip this one. We can come back to this just to give her a second to talk about it, because that is the story that she covered at length all year long.
Yes.
And it's one of the biggest stories of the year. So we'll see that. So
we got an award for that too.
Yeah. But yes, by the way, yes. So anyway, I'm stammering because I don't want to focus more about the thing. But yes, there is recognition in the nominations, for instance, with the Brodies and other stuff going on.
Oh, I thought you knew the award I was talking about.
No, I don't know what award you're talking about. I know that I think it made the Brodies nominations.
Oh, I hope so. That would be great.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a second award.
So what we did was we captured all of the big stories that were a part of 2025, and we're just laying them out here. And there's, I think, maybe 13 or 16 of them. One of them here was the polygamy cartoon. The unveiling of the cartoon happened in December of 24, but then the removal of it happened in February of 25. The church got so much criticism because it was trying to justify loyalty to leadership, and it decided to use this story to accomplish that. It's a great story if you're a cult to do that. The trouble is, if you don't want to be a cult, you have to remove it. So that one.
Yes. When a grown-up comes to you and tells you that God has told him that you are to marry him, you say yes.
Yes, you say yeah, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it doesn't feel right, even if your gut is telling you don't do it, you say yeah. Bow your head and say yes. Both of these ones, by the way, there was the James Huntsman. Actually, it's another one that has two of them. But this is one story. James Huntsman filing the lawsuit against the church. And if I'm not mistaken, it was in this February 3rd story where he essentially is told by the legal system that he's lost the battle. And so the church, President Nelson gets to say, your tithing is mine. So, suck it, loser. Huntsman had to go on his merry way. So that was another big story.
Do you remember, can you go back to that last slide? Do you remember that part in The Simpsons where Mr. Burns is going like this and saying, I love to wallow in my own crapulence?
Yeah.
Do you remember that part?
I know the scene.
Okay, because that's what I think President Nelson is saying right there.
And there had to have been a huge smile on their faces when they're like, oh, we get to take tithing and be dishonest and cheat the system and screw everybody over, and we get to keep it. Isn't this country great? Then we had this one. Remember this one? This was the judge. And what was the other guy's position?
Fire chief in Tremonton, Utah. And I went back and I reviewed this because I remember this was an atrocious story. And today I spent some time going back and not only reviewing the story as we first talked about it on March 17th, St. Patty's Day, 2025, but also to see if there had been any real updates in the matters. But this was with the fire chief there on the right with his hand uplifted. Ned Brady Hansen is his name. And the judge there, ex-judge Kevin Christensen. And that was still one of the most remarkable, strange cases I've ever seen, where this guy is a judge in the county, the other guy's the fire chief, and they are both engaged in child sexual images and sharing them with each other as well as other people. Apparently, they have a sexual relationship going on. They also talk about in the allegations are that stuff. And the allegations are also that they would have discussions about how to, seduce children and get children to do what it is that they wanted with them. And so there's all sorts of things. And also the judge having contact with people he thought were 13-year-old girls. The thing is that the cops busted the fire chief. Okay. They found him and they arrested him. And I think they arrested him in February of 2025. And then the fire chief who's charged with this stuff, the cops want no bail. And the fire chief appears in front of this judge, Judge Christensen. Can you imagine the electricity in the courtroom between the two? And this judge sets bail such that the fire chief can make bail and be released from jail pending trial. And then it turns out that the electronics, the computer, the phone that they had seized when they busted the fire chief and they're doing the analysis leads them to the judge and all the other stuff I had told you about. Mind blown. Incredible. And they're both still in custody, I believe, awaiting trial.
These are two prominent citizens in the community who serve in a capacity where they have a solemn responsibility to save and protect victims within their various, and I'll use this word, stewardship. And I'm in my head going, how did these two get together? Hey, you want to go to lunch? You want to go to lunch, buddy? We're eating your BLT and you're like, hey, at the expense of you thinking I'm weird, have you ever, been interested or curious? Like, how do you even get into, allegedly, the conversation where two respectable citizens serving in capacities where they save and protect victims among the public talk to each other in such a way that when they walk away from that conversation, they decide to collaborate together in order to pursue children to carry out sexual abuse on, allegedly. I don't know how you even have a conversation that allows that to even take place.
I'm supposed to have their secret signs and their oaths and their passwords. I mean, I love young. Don't you, Bill?
No, I don't like kids at all. So if that's what we're talking about, I will say
that was one of the things that was in the story, that in one of his texts or communications, the judge had said, I love young. And then it described that as being, that's an expression that's used among this community of people to say that they love kids.
Yeah. So you see Chris Hansen there. Why don't you two take a seat? So there's that one. There's the Jared Halverson story. If you remember, Halverson putting his foot in his mouth and sort of mansplaining how women should be okay with the roles that they're given. And that didn't go well. And he ended up being criticized by numerous female voices in the space of Mormonism and post-Mormonism. Some of them sat down with you and me, Britt Hartley, Dr. Julie Hanks, and some of them from inside the church sat down with him, and they were much more direct and bold than I'd ever heard a woman speak in a believing, faithful space before.
That's right.
And he eventually apologized, said that he needs to do better and that all of us need to do better. And then I don't think he's approached the topic ever again.
Well, I don't follow him, so I'm not sure. But I'm sure of one thing, and that's it's a Christmas miracle.
It's a Christmas miracle. To quote the old vaudeville joke, I just flew in and boy, my arms are tired, right? Oh my God.
You just flew in from the Garden of Eden.
I did. In the Garden of Eden, baby. Yeah, I was there. It was something else. We'll have to talk about that later. I don't want to interrupt all of this, but thank you for letting me join you late. I was flying, I was driving. It was planes, trains, and automobiles, but here I am. Catch me up. Which story are we on?
The very first story we skipped because it would be entirely inappropriate. So this story and to talk about it without you being here, Rebecca. This was one of the big stories of the year. So I was telling the audience, we narrowed down the top stories to 13, 16 of them or so. We're going through them. We allowed the audience to cast their vote and tell us what they thought the top 5 stories of the year were. And we'll get to what those were. But one of the top 13 or 16 stories is your coverage of the Fairview Temple, the McKinney Temple, right? Which eventually gets renamed Fairview in this fiasco. What would you want to say about this whole ordeal over the course of 2025?
Well, when I saw that this was one of the stories that we might touch on tonight, I was trying to think back. Okay, so what happened this year and last year? My mind just kind of went blank. I was like, oh my gosh, we've been covering this for so long, but it's true. And if you guys have followed along with this, in 2025 was when, they had that mediated compromise smaller building, but they weren't submitting plans for the CUP and they were going to sue the town. And then they finally submitted the plans. And then we live streamed several of the town meetings. It was really interesting. Finally, there was a vote. It passed, but then there was a question on, did it really pass? Because was a supermajority needed? That kind of came out over the summer. And the residents there actually appealed to the district court there in Texas and said, look, the way Fairview calculated, it's hard to explain. I'm sure you guys have been following this, but if a certain number of people say, no, we oppose this, they have to have a super majority of a vote on the town council to pass something. And that didn't happen. And the town is saying, no, we calculated it that we didn't need a super majority. It went back and forth and back and forth. Well, believe it or not, the ruling just came in. We just found out about it yesterday, as far as the residents saying, I don't think this temple passed because of the way the town calculated this protest zone. And the ruling, what was your prediction, RFM?
I didn't know enough about it, but based upon, I said that if the calculations are correct regarding the amount of property shared with the temple site, and you know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Then I would think that by the law of the statute that the citizens of Fairview would win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think they thought so too. I had their lawyer on, Mormonish, to talk to him, and it seemed to me open and shut. That's always a bad sign when to a lay person it seems open and shut. But apparently the decision from the district court was actually handed down on December 22nd, but nobody really knew about it. And they went with the town. They said the town calculated everything correctly, that it did not need a supermajority to pass the permit to start constructing the temple. And so construction can begin. Now, I know there's fencing already up there and there's equipment waiting there, standing by. With this decision, it looks like building is going to start. So I've talked to, people in the town, and I've talked to people in the citizens group, that brought this appeal, of it. And I think they're all just ready to move forward and to say we all did everything we possibly could.
Yeah.
We saw it to the very end. And I will still go on record saying, do you remember the size of the original McKinney Temple?
Mm-hmm.
178 foot tall spire, 65 foot walls.
Mm-hmm.
That it was really the thing that was going to kill them. And they reduced that. The mediation with the town and the publicity and all of that got it reduced to 30-foot walls and 120-foot steeples. So even though it might not have gone the way the town wanted, I hope someday they'll realize that, boy, they dodged a huge, and I do mean huge, bullet with those 65-foot walls.
They need to look at this as a victory, because a lot of times it is a matter of perspective. And sometimes, usually in every court case, neither side gets everything they want. Usually. Okay. And you've got to look at your wins as a victory and not look at your losses as a defeat, because you're never going to get everything you want as a practical matter. Maybe once in a blue moon it'll happen. But so this was an amazing thing. By the way, Rebecca, am I correct then that the temple that is going to be built there and is in the process already of being built is the same one that a year ago the city and the lawyers for the church agreed upon in mediation?
Size-wise, yes. The little drawing that they kind of made on a napkin, it had kind of a more of a, how do I describe it? Phallic looking steeple. Now it's a nice, just a regular looking steeple. So I think it looks 100% better than it could have. And it's smaller, and that's all very positive. Also renamed Fairview, which I think is kind of interesting because they just recently renamed the San Jose Temple the Sunnydale Temple, or Sunnyvale. Sunnydale. It's anyway. So I wonder if now they're going, oh, people like this. They like it when we call the temple after where it is. So maybe it's something that they think now is going to give them more positive PR. I will say the legacy of Fairview is going forward. As we saw in Southport, Maine, temples are now just going to be whispered at a small fireside to let people know what's happening. And that means people are in place already in the city. Negotiations have already started. Land is already, they are going to make sure, kind of like the Hinckley era, everything is a done deal practically before they just announce something randomly. Russia, China, Dubai, right? They're not going to do that anymore. So that is the legacy of Fairview and what everyone watching contributed to by keeping this in the media, on social media. All of us who podcasted about it, we did this, whether it's good or bad, that now it is just whispered when there's a new temple, and we'll just kind of hear about it. They're not even going to let the members know, because many of those faithful members send emails to all of us and let us know what's going on. And that's one thing I have to point out as Fairview kind of comes to a close here. These were faithful members that contacted all of us and said, we don't like what our church is doing. And in fact, when I talked to someone from the city, they told me that they have talked to many faithful LDS in the area who have said, we don't like, what's happened, this legacy here that now we are left dealing with as far as PR in the town, personal relationships with neighbors. It's been a disaster, and everyone on both sides recognize it. So
should I hold my breath for the Washington, D.C. temple to be renamed the Kensington, Maryland temple? I don't think that's going to happen, but
anything can happen.
And then we covered from there. We talked about the cartoons already. We talked about James Huntsman and the lawsuit being dismissed.
Okay.
We talked about the fire chief and the judge and that whole rigmarole. We talked about Jared Halverson and his putting his foot in his mouth. And this is where we're at now. So the next one here is when Michelle Stone and 132 problems. She was requested by local leadership from direction higher above to refrain from putting out any more content and to take her stuff down or face church discipline. So there was that episode. And again, I'll pause after each of these. If there is something you guys want to say, we can. Otherwise, I'll move through these and then we can.
Well, there is the conclusion of the story, which is that she bowed the knee and kissed the ring.
Yes. And she has not. Those videos are not on her channel currently. Somebody else then, if you remember, downloaded the videos and put them up on a new channel called 132 Solutions. And when we pointed out that wasn't going to fly probably with the church and the reasons why, because she does have control to control her content. Hence, if it does exist, it means she's allowing it to exist. Michelle immediately asked whoever that person was to remove those, and they've been removed from that channel as well. And so 132 problems, not a problem anymore. All right.
I do know that I have one little comment there. I do know that she, is still very involved in the Journal of Polygamy, and their conferences and things like that. So she's still there. And I will point out that since the Michelle Stone story, I had reported, I can't remember the gentleman's name now, but another person that put out content about polygamy. It's called Polygamy Revisionism now. He also was threatened, and he took his content down. The other person that was threatened, Karen Hyatt, she did not take her content down. She is the producer of 132 Problems, or was, and she was excommunicated. So it is very interesting that this is what they're going after. There are lots of other beliefs and factions and people doing things, but what they seem to be going after are the people that want to take a second look at polygamy.
It is interesting where they choose to fight people on. Yep. So that is intriguing. Okay, so there's that. There was a moment where the church settled 100 sex abuse lawsuits. I think this was in California. And it was sort of all these cases had piled up, and they, in like one fell swoop, said, we'll settle all of these. And they made, if I'm not mistaken, payouts to a ton of victims. And so that made the news. It was at the exact same time that the new Pope in Catholicism was called. No coincidence, by the way. Sex abuse in both directions, aplenty in both of those faiths, Mormonism and Catholicism. So there's that. If there's anything you want to say about that, feel free. Jake Retzlaff, the BYU quarterback, accused of sexual impropriety, and he ends up transferring out of the school because he doesn't want to face the suspension and not be able to play. So that was one of the bigger stories of the year. LDS garment revolution. There's the old.
I guess BYU did okay without him, didn't they?
They did pretty well, didn't they? Maybe it doesn't matter so much who's throwing the ball as long as it's one of those top 4 or 5 guys. This isn't the old style garment. This is the middle style garment, because now we have the new style tank top garments. Anything you want to say about not these ones, but the new ones? These ones are atrocious.
They're all atrocious. I just think, and this is the reason I keep hammering on garments and bringing it up, this is something that is going to change the entire landscape of the church. I think it's Jim Bennett that says it's going to bring the church down. I don't disagree with whoever it was that said that, because again, for younger women and their partners, there's freedom there. There's new experiences. I've been following on faithful social media, women talking about the half slip and what do you wear under it? And some women are saying nothing. Isn't that an interesting thing? That's like going from 0 to 60, right? But just the idea that they're choosing their own undergarments and the freedom that brings for a person personally, and also a couple. And then for us older women, we're left going, what the hell happened? And what was it all for? And I'm telling you, it's giving everyone an existential crisis. So I don't think this is over. The impact of the tank top garment.
I think the church may have arrived at this point where a lot of totalitarian regimes arrive at. I'm not saying the church is a totalitarian regime, but I'm just saying that you get to the point where if you crack, you have no more options. You're on the horns of a dilemma. If you crack down any more, people are going to rebel against it. And if you give freedom to them in pieces, they're going to want more.
Yeah, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. What this change in 24 other changes over the last 5 years indicate is that the leadership of the LDS Church has lost the ability to control the message, and they no longer have the loyalty and control of the members, that if they don't cater to the youngest generation of Mormons, who, as we pointed out in recent weeks, are leaving at an incredibly fast pace, then in a generation or two, there will be, doesn't matter how much money you have, there will be no church left. So there's that. Okay. We still haven't gotten a conclusion on this yet. There's still maybe things going on behind the scenes, but we became aware due to the Widow's Mite report that the LDS Church is likely in some IRS violation. And this isn't the SEC fiasco. This is a second go around of other types of violations. And the Widow's Mite says we might be wrong, but by the way, the data seems clearly to indicate that we're not, that the church has violated IRS regulations, again, by not reporting certain things. Okay. Jasmine Rappley, Mormon apologist, apologizes. I actually didn't think this was that big of a story. I just wanted the world to see that a Mormon apologist apologizes again. I thought that was important.
You just like saying it.
Yeah. I wish Mormon apologists apologized more often. They should. They don't. But we got one here from Jasmine. So thank you.
What did she apologize for?
She got a lot of backlash. It was about, how reporting doesn't help victims of CSA and you shouldn't report. Remember that education?
Oh, right. When she was talking about that lady who spoke at the Fair Mormon conference this past summer.
Yeah.
And saying that
so much backlash.
Report, what was it? That reporting, what was it again? It was on the mandatory reporting issue,
she was saying that doesn't work. That's not effective. I believe it was just something like that. Anyway, what it caused is that so many survivors and victims, reached out and shared their story and said, you are way off base in what you're saying, so. Yeah.
All right. So there's that. Wade Christofferson, shocking arrest sends Mormon church scrambling. Anything you want to say about that? I have a funny feeling we'll get a chance to comment again on this one. So I'll skip past it. We can
I
talk.
think we will. The only thing I want to say about it is it seems to be missing the beginning of the quotation marks.
Punctuation police. There you go.
I'm
Well,
sorry.
just remember the update is that he has been moved to Butler County Jail in Ohio. And I keep checking it. I haven't seen anything about whatever the next step would be, appearing before a judge, or, I haven't seen anything else about it. I do see that D. Todd, his brother, is out talking to everybody. He's going to give a young adult fireside in a couple weeks. So they are in no way taking him out of the public eye at all.
I hope he'll be talking about how to spot signs of child abuse within your family.
Especially when it allegedly had multiple occurrences and you seem to struggle to get any of them except for the last one.
Yeah.
All right.
And that may sounded unduly harsh for me. And if so, I apologize. I also think that actually might be of some benefit. In other words, instead of just the old schlock, that's all he's going to talk about. Stuff the kids have heard a million times before, but now it's really special because this schlock is coming right out of the mouth of an apostle.
If you're right, RFM, if this was a healthy church, it would be a great moment to step forward and go, we need to do better. And here's what I could have done better. And here's how this went not seen and happened without us doing the right things. And for everybody out there, let this be a lesson that these are the right things to do. Yeah. By the way, Rebecca, I didn't have the ability to grab your data, but I'm sure that on Mormonish's channel, you experienced also the same kind of thing, which was that this episode with Wade Christofferson was seen by a lot of people, almost 30,000 on our channel, 10.5 thousand watch hours, 142 new subscribers due to that episode, which, RFM does a much better job than me of covering current events in episodes that come up just sort of spontaneously because of things. And it's sort of a lesson to the three of us. And I think we've always known this, but in this space on YouTube, current events is really what seems to grab people and have the potential to get lots of views.
And you're saying that because we did this spontaneously on a Friday afternoon, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah,
Friday
it was
at
a
noon.
pop-up podcast because we were kind of following all the information and saying there's no one clear place where all the information is. And we were all gathering different parts of it. We were sharing screenshots and things. And we're like, we just need to put this out there. What we know so far, responsibly. And people were very interested because they were seeing little pieces of it and parts of it and things coming out. So yeah, I think we should commit to everybody that when we do come across things like that, we will try to do something, not at the regular newscast time. I think it's important. And we tend to just see things or have people send us things. So it gives us the ability to then put that out for everybody.
And this shows that our intuition was correct, that when we talked that morning and said, this is huge.
Yeah.
We've got to do a show on it. The numbers don't lie. It was huge and we did need to do a show on it. This was the other.
Like that was mainly Rebecca's intuition.
It was
calling that wrong.
No,
I had been working it since about 1 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. And hadn't gone to bed because I was gathering this stuff. So yeah.
This was the other one that we did a spontaneous show on in 2025. There was, and then the other one that sort of falls into that is the Fairview town meeting, which wasn't super spontaneous, but it was on an off night because we knew that was coming and we knew it was important. The Charlie Kirk assassination, one of these, every year there's something in our country that's just huge, and it's easy to identify like the year different from a different year because of that event that happened. And I think in many ways, the Charlie Kirk assassination is the event of 2025. Yeah. And it turns out that it was a Mormon of sorts, whether he believes or not, but a Mormon, at least at one time in his life, was the alleged killer. So,
and honestly, just sitting here and listening to you right now, Bill, I do feel like I can look at it from a third party point of view and say, why is it that we have so much trouble just calling him a Mormon, for crying out loud? We're not saying he was a missionary at the time, but he's a Mormon.
I think we could say raised Mormon.
Yes,
that's okay.
He's a Mormon. And we're not saying that he was actively going to church or everything, but that doesn't mean you're not a Mormon anymore. And so I'm just saying that it strikes me all of a sudden how funny it is that Mormons want to quibble. I guess it's not funny, it's predictable. Mormons want to quibble about calling him a Mormon and come down on the side that says no. Whereas there's this other kid who I think did some video in, is it Minneapolis or someplace?
Yeah, I was going to
Whose
talk to you
video
guys
went
about that.
viral.
Let's cover
Okay.
that. Yeah, don't cover it now. Let's cover it next week.
No,
Yeah.
all I'm saying is it went viral, and
Yeah.
apparently he's a Mormon, and now all the other people who would distance themselves from Tyler Anderson being a Mormon are saying, "Hey, and by the way, this kid's a Mormon."
Yeah.
The reason I quibble is because I want to leave room that he's a Mormon in the same way that you're a Mormon, RFM. And if he has a decisive moment in his mind where he's like, Mormonism is BS, I don't buy into it anymore, I know it doesn't add up, I'm out, and he's left belief, then I think it's fair for the other side to go, no, he's an ex-Mormon, even if he's on the records, on the rolls. And so that's why I pause and quibble about it. Because if RFM, if you were to rob a bank tomorrow, both sides would have a lot of problems of going like, a Mormon robbed a bank, and
But
Just like
I think
Butch
that's part
Cassidy.
of it because the media does refer to all of these as Mormons. That's always a part of it,
Right. And this is a discussion that
Mormons
we
this,
have, right?
yeah.
In this
And-
tiny little corner of the universe. But history will always record that the assassin of Charlie Kirk was a Mormon.
Right.
yes.
But I think social media refers to people as Mormon just because it's a juxtaposition of what a Mormon should be like and what they're doing. Just today I was reading about some Australian footballer and, an affair, and they're like, Mormon return missionary is the other woman. Why is that in the article? But it makes it very sensational, right?
Mhm.
That a Mormon return missionary would be the other woman. So I think if we do report on things like that and talk about Mormons, it's because, wider media does.
And this one got a lot of results as well. 37.6 thousand people watched it. 9,500 hours of watch time, 204 new subscribers.
By the way, out there, if you haven't subscribed yet, would you please hit that little subscribe button right there on your phone if you're watching on a phone, or on your computer if you're watching it on a computer? That would be great. Thanks.
Thank
Well,
you.
and here's a side note about the Charlie Kirk episode. Several episodes that we did, that transcended Mormonism. A lot of people in my circle do not know what I do. Once I started reporting on Charlie Kirk, it found its way many different places, outside of just people that follow Mormonism, post-Mormonism.
Like
So-
where?
Oh, I'm not going to say, but
This
places
is
I
the
would have
first I'm hearing about this.
places I would have preferred it didn't end up, but when you cover something that's national, international like that, people are gonna find it.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, there's that. So that one, and then this one was two stories in one. These were both big stories.
Yeah.
President Nelson's passing, and then the LDS Church attacked in Michigan, where the guy just, again, I don't think he had said some things, but he just one day just got in his truck and drove right into the chapel of the building in Michigan, an award building. And so that was a big one.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say that from all the evidence, he did this not as a random attack of anger. He attacked this church because it was the LDS church, and his anger was focused at the LDS church. And then he shot a bunch of Mormons and set the place on fire.
Yeah, and a horrific thing. And Nelson's passing happened the same week, and so we covered both those stories in one episode. Then we had Tim Ballard strikes again. LDS Church has a deep state, and that has only expanded even further with his recent set of episodes he's been releasing. This guy does not come off to me as grounded and healthy, and he has some ulterior agenda that I wouldn't be surprised if he starts a church here soon and starts getting a following. I don't know what to make of him, but something's not right.
He has no doubt of his own excellence and destiny.
Yes, and he's convincing a lot of people, but when you watch it from trying to be a rational, critical thinker, nothing he is saying is adding up and makes sense. All right. So what we did was we took all those stories. We gave you, the viewer, the chance to vote on that. And over the last couple of weeks, you've been doing that. And so we get to the results.
Oh,
And tonight we're going to share the top 5 stories.
Nice graph.
Yeah, the biggest story, and we'll see which one that was. We'll start at number 5 and work to number 1. But the biggest story got 20.5% of the votes. So essentially, 1 out of every 5 people voting said that is the biggest story. Next one was 17.3, then 12.6. We'll see what the other 2 were here in just a second. So number 5, I'll leave a moment here, and when I get to the number, feel free to guess what it is. If you want to put in the live chat what you think the number 5 story was, and I'll leave a moment for that. And
can I guess too?
You can if you didn't look at them.
Well, I look. That's the whole point of it.
You can't guess. So number 5, and I'm going to see if I have a drum roll. I thought maybe I had one.
I'll bet Rebecca can do a drum roll.
Really,
She's talented.
like a bat kind of a thing on your desk.
Yeah, I like that. That was good.
Was it? I felt like I was shaking my whole.
The closest I have is this.
Oh, good. A rim shot.
That's what you need to play after pretty much everything RFM says. That's yeah.
If I just hit the button after he says things, then people won't know which things I get and which ones I don't. It'll just all be good.
That's it.
They don't have a clue as it is.
He needs that as a soundtrack. Just follow him around in his life.
Perfect timing on that one.
All right. The number 5 story was the 100 settled sex abuse lawsuits in California by the LDS Church. Number 5 got 7.9% of your votes. Not surprising. That is such a large number. We already know so many of these happen in Mormonism and happen in Catholicism. The Catholicism there with the new Pope, but not that he's the one doing it, but his religion. But 100 lawsuits settled in one story covering these things happening is just wow. So there's that. Number 4, folks, if you want to guess what the number 4 story is, and have your number 3 vote ready to go once you click this one. That way we're not having to pause for too long. But number 4, the number 4 story is, and it was the LDS Church attacked. It was not the death of President Nelson. By the way, President Nelson's death didn't make any of the top 5 stories. Frankly, once a prophet dies, I actually don't think that most Mormons care about that leader anymore. And you can tell that by the fact that even the 70s, when giving general conference talks, self-admit that these guys aren't even worth the value of vintage comic books or collector cars. And Mormons know that to be true. They simply move on to the next guy. I'll also say, the church doesn't really care in terms of institutionally, because if you go look on the church's website about their history, there are multiple leaders where they say George Albert Smith became president on this date. Next thing they note is he died, and they move on to the next guy. They don't even have a vibrant story to tell about these men. Many of them are just nothings in the annals of Mormon history.
It's like Jeremy and Omni.
Bless you.
I feel like he died at the wrong time. I mean, he couldn't have picked a worse week to pass away as far as PR wise. Look at President Holland. It's everywhere. I get Mormon alerts, LDS alerts, Latter-day Saint alerts. It's the story everywhere. When President Nelson died, maybe for a few hours, that was it. But then it was all Michigan. So he was just a little side note. He could, as far as, being noticed, he could not have picked a worse time to pass away.
And this got 10.2% of the votes. So the LDS Church attacked in Michigan was the number 4 story. Nelson did not make the list. Number 3. And so now we're getting into what I think, again, the LDS Church attack in Michigan isn't the top 3. You have to imagine these are bigger stories than that. The number 3 biggest story, the LDS garment revolution, tank top garments. This was a big deal. Your guys' thoughts, 12.6% of the votes.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that it ranks so highly.
Are you? No,
Yeah.
this is something that is so personal that everybody can relate to. Everyone has a feeling about it. Everyone has a reaction. And it's like everybody keeps saying, it's not about the garment. It isn't. It's a much bigger picture around it and what it means. And especially for women and partners, of women, it's just a huge deal. So, and I say its influence will continue to have an impact going forward. So we've only just begun to see this.
What
Yeah.
did you think, Bill? Were you surprised?
No, I think Rebecca's right. I think culturally, like Mormonism and what it means to the members and how willing they are to be obedient and what it takes for a person to leave or to question. I think this is symbolic of that entire process going on behind the scenes of leaders fighting for members to be loyal and to obey, and members being fed up and not going to do it anymore.
Yeah. Imagine if coffee were okay in 2026. That would be the number one story for all the reasons that you just described. Even though it seems like a very small thing, it's nothing, it's everything. And it's not about the coffee.
Someday it will be. Someday coffee will be okay.
It could be 2026. We haven't even made our predictions for the year, have we?
Yeah. No, we ought to do that. We ought to come in our next one first of the year, and we ought to make predictions of what will happen. I'll just tell you a prediction. We'll see if it comes true. Lots more sex abuse cases in Mormonism. That's my prediction.
Yeah, that's not even a prediction. That happens all the time.
I would like to see Henry B. Eyring be president of the church, even just for a brief period of time.
Yeah, I predict that we will have 2 prophets in 2026. And
I
then
predict 3.
Yeah, and then I was going to say, and then a 3rd. And it'll kind of shake things up as far as making the world scratch his head and go, why are these guys so old? And they're in, and then they pass away, and then they're in, and they pass away. I don't know. I think it could happen.
Well, it's not easy being prophet.
No.
Eyring has to have a little shame. He gets forgotten. Even this morning we were talking about Oakes is on his way out and Uchtdorf's next. We sort of forget that Elder Eyring, Cryring Eyring, is sitting there waiting to just bawl his eyes out as president of the church.
Well, some faithful media sources are trying to promote him. I saw one the other day where they had taken a picture. They took a good one of him. I mean, they tried to really make him look, dynamic and sitting up kind of, and they said next in line, to the seat of the
Oh my
so I
Lord.
can say, oh, you're trying to do a little, like that, but
Look, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but Henry B. Eyring reminds me of what it would look like if Goofy became a human being.
I'll just say this, outside of him crying every single talk, I don't think believers could name 2 things about Elder Eyring.
Oh gosh.
His dad's a scientist, and that's it.
And he's a scientist, apparently, a physicist and a business, graduated from Harvard. That's what we hear a lot. He graduated from
it was
Harvard.
Stanford. Or is that where he taught? Maybe that's where he taught.
Yeah. Anyway, you'll see some rehabilitation and PR on him because he is now next in line to the throne. So we'll see.
Gosh.
Yeah. I wonder what big changes he's been planning all his life. All right. Oops. Sorry.
Oh, no. I hope you weren't watching, folks.
Yeah.
If you were watching, you can't participate in this part.
I didn't see
the right moment. Number 2, kudos to Rebecca Biblioteca. You covered this all throughout the year. It really was one of the biggest stories in Mormonism. It is the Fairview Temple fiasco is what I'll call it. Back and forth. Who was going to win? This is the change that made. We're not going to do this. Yes, you're going to do that. What do you want to say, Rebecca? Give you first dibs on this story.
Yeah. And again, it hasn't just been this year. It's been the year before. And it's on the heels of all the other temples that I still need to mention. Cody and Lone Mountain and Heber. And, Cody and Lone Mountain construction is ongoing. We saw the full cycle. And Fairview was the only one that was able, just because of certain factors. They didn't have an inside man like in Cody. They didn't have an all LDS, county council like in Heber. They
had
were
a certain mayor, a certain guy as mayor.
Yep. They
who
had
wasn't taking their crap.
certain people in place. And so I'll almost say again, it isn't necessarily about Fairview or even temple building. It's a place where the playbook and the tactics of the LDS Church were on display for everybody to see. And it was a place where there was publicity about this. People were interested internationally, in the media, where even the SEC, it was hard to explain to people what that was or what that meant or why that was or what the bad behavior of the LDS Church was. With this temple building, it was something everybody could understand.
Yeah.
There is no steeple doctrine. Everybody knows that. And this is a time where LDS faithful members stood up, took notice, and said, wait a minute, that is not right. And that's where the difference was. And that's why Fairview mattered and will always matter going forward.
Wow, you're right. I had forgotten that for a bit, but in addition to just being like the worst neighbors imaginable, the Mormons also revealed themselves as people who will just make stuff up and say it as if it's true in order to gain a tactical advantage.
Yeah. The playbook revealed for everyone.
All right. Sorry. Thought I was muted. My dog was trying to get my attention and I was talking and I looked down and the mute button was not pushed. So there's the opposite of the problem that always happens. I was not muted that time. Okay.
Are we to the number one story though?
Oh my goodness.
Number one story. Biggest story of 2025. I bet no one can imagine what this might be. Biggest story of 2025. This one was a no-brainer for me. And I knew the moment we put up the poll that this was going to win. The biggest story of 2025, of course, it's D. Todd Christofferson's brother, Wade Christofferson. By the way, I should go back and just note 17.3% thought Fairview was the biggest story of the year. 20.5% of people, 1 out of 5. Wade Christofferson, allegedly multiple sexual abuse cases, seems to involve the family and nobody ever puts an end to it until 40 years after the first instance, right? 60, something like that. It's been a lot of decades of him allegedly committing abuse and nobody doing a thing until recently. What stands out about this story to you guys? Anything that you want to make mention of here?
Before we get to that, and while you're thinking about what you want to say, Rebecca, I just want to say about Rebecca that her involvement and reporting, it's not just been reporting about the Fairview Temple and these other temples, but there's been an involvement. There's been a lot of stuff that she's been involved in behind the scenes, some of which I know, some of which no doubt I don't know, but it's been extensive. And a lot of this has come to light and been part of what people are talking about because of this lady you see right here on the screen, Rebecca Biblioteca.
Oh,
I just wanted to say that. And if you are so moved, okay, is it true, Bill, that Rebecca is nominated over there at the Brody Awards?
I don't think so. I've never gotten a Brody or been nominated for anything. I'm very still behind the scenes.
If you feel like you would want to vote for that, I would encourage everybody to go to the Brody Awards who would like to vote for that and do that now while you're thinking about it so you don't forget about it. Because I think that she would be a shoo-in based upon that alone. But
what category
unless, of course, she's running against me in some category.
Exactly. It would just be nosy person or something like that, just trying to figure stuff out. I don't know if there's a category for that exactly.
No.
So I will tell you this is kind of interesting. So I have all kinds of people that are kind of insiders in the world of temple building, not directly in the church office building, but kind of around the sides. And I once asked one of them, and I'll be very general here, what do they think all this, publicity for the way that they're building temples is coming from? Where do they think that the information is coming from? Are they even tracking how much media there is about every move that they make? And this person connected to temple building said, well, the rumor is that there is a married couple that flies around anywhere a temple is announced and whips the people up into a frenzy to protest it. And that's what they think is happening. And I think they're talking about Mormonish.
They don't know that you and Landon aren't married.
No, but I think they're just, the main part of it is they can't imagine that people in a town on their own would have a problem with what they were doing. They assume it's an anti-Mormon that has flown to the town and is whipping people up into a frenzy. So that just makes me laugh, you know?
Yes. You know something? It is interesting, and it's a way of avoiding responsibility.
Exactly.
They can't possibly see that they could be responsible in any way because, God and that whole thing.
Exactly.
I know that the nominations, so I went over to the Brody Awards. I don't see Mormonish or Rebecca on there.
But yeah, we've never gotten an award ever. We are so under the radar.
And the deadline is passed?
No. Nominations, I believe, can still be made. So, folks.
Hang on a second. So I'm going to go over there. Or you want to do this right now and nominate Rebecca for something?
Oh, my God. I don't think there's a category for me. You don't have to do it now. Let's talk about Wade Christopherson.
Yeah, hold on. I know you're trying to be humble and get away from it, but I'll just say Rebecca Biblioteca's coverage of the Fairview Temple, I think, stands out above a lot of things that have happened over the last year. And so I think RFM, to what you say, if folks do want to go over there, if you just go and do a search engine and type in Brody Awards 2025, you'll see one of the search results says last call for nominations. And it really is going to end here soon. So everything's, a lot of things are on there, but please, by all means, if you want to submit it, you need to go to the very bottom and put it in the comments. So put it down there at the bottom. And I think that would mean a lot. I think it's one of the biggest news stories of the year and one of the best coverages by somebody in this space of a news story in 2025. So kudos to you, Rebecca.
You guys are awesome. And I have to say, with Wade Christopherson, back to his story, it's Floodlit. Again, I always say that support Floodlit, follow Floodlit. I mean, that's how I first learned about Wade Christopherson. I saw a little update from Floodlit and I'm like, oh my gosh, and then started digging in, and they just do an incredible, I don't even know how they do what they do. It's absolutely amazing.
This was our last slide for the show. These were the things we talked about going into the Elder Holland passing, which we did, all the big stories of 2025, and then the top 5 biggest stories of 2025, with the biggest one being Wade Christopherson, brother of LDS first presidency member. Now, we used to say apostle when it first happened, first presidency member. Yeah, I don't think it gets much bigger than that in terms of a black eye on the church. So any last words from you guys?
Elder Oak's first decision as president.
That was inspired, huh? Yeah. And he can't do anything with that now because the church released that statement that said that when the previous leader dies, it automatically goes to the person with the most seniority, and that person chooses his counselors. So we all know who chose D. Todd Christopherson. If only they could see around corners, huh?
Well, and there's no way they didn't know that was lurking out there. As we talked about, I think 2 weeks ago on the newscast, D. Todd himself was part of that committee where they scour media. They talk to, GAs and 70s, and they see if there's anything rising up that might somehow touch the church or hurt it. They do reports. They really follow this closely. So I don't think there's any way that not only D. Todd himself, but others might have known that was there. And maybe they just said, that's nothing, as they tend to overlook that as being something. So I don't know. In my mind, I can't see any way that they didn't know.
My survey of church history indicates that the church consistently overestimates its ability to hide things. They always think they can get away with it.
Yeah, very true. By the way, folks, I did put into the live chat, wherever you're watching this, the 2 donation links. So support the Mormon Newscast. I'm sorry, there's not a space there. There is in the original typing of it. You can go down in the show notes of this episode and you can find it there as well. But if you appreciate the newscast, us bringing you stories every week, the top stories happening in Mormonism, we'll continue to do that into 2026. It's going to be an exciting year. But please do support both the Mormonish channel as well as RFM and I with the Mormon Discussion channel through one of those links. And again, kudos to you, Rebecca. You really are, RFM said it, but I'll say it as well. You really are the MVP of this team. You are. And both of us are happy to admit it because you do all the hard work. And we sort of wait till the last minute to kind of figure out what we're going to cover. And meanwhile, you've already got the dirty and spilled the tea on all of it. So you really are good at this, and kudos to you for all that you bring to the Mormon Newscast.
Oh, thank you. This is awesome.
Here, here.
Yeah.
That's right. So let me ask you guys, what are you doing for New Year's? Anything fun? Because, we're getting just a few hours away.
I'm going to go ahead, Arvin.
I was going to say, Wendy's having the perfect New Year. She everybody bailed on her, so she's now with 2 kids, 5 and 10 years old, at Chuck E. Cheese.
Oh my gosh.
That's like my definition of hell.
Have you ever been to Chuck E. Cheese, RFM?
Yes, that's why it's my definition of
Oh,
hell.
okay. So you know what you're. Yeah, I've hosted many birthday parties at Chuck E. Cheese. Yes.
Really?
Yeah, for my
Which
kids.
costume did you wear?
Not for me. Yeah, exactly. No, I was in the band. I once helped a mom at a party, a neighborhood, party, and we left a kid there. We left a kid. Like, we had 15 kids and we were all helping, and we get back to our neighborhood. We're like, oh my God. We went back and found him. He was fine, but yeah, those were the days.
I'm glad to hear that. Did he even know that he'd been left?
No, not at all. He was in the ball pit. He was laying under the balls. We just didn't see him. So, but Mormon mom, hundreds of kids. Yeah, it happened.
Can you imagine how dirty and gross?
Oh my God.
Worse than a toilet handle,
Oh my gosh.
Ball pit. Yeah. They don't go in and just like wipe let's clean every ball. That's not happening.
No.
As RFM said, folks, hit subscribe, hit like, tune in next week. We'll just keep bringing this week after week, the top stories in Mormonism. It'll be interesting to see a year from now where we're at. Next week, let's put out some predictions and share what we think they'll be. Like I said, more sex abuse cases is my guess. I know you're like, that's not really predicting anything, is it?
No, more
Wouldn't it be great if we had a year without any
Christofferson.
child sex abuse stories that involve Mormonism?
Wouldn't that be nice?
No, there are so many more that we could cover. I think we need to let everybody know that there seriously are, like, I swear, 3 a week. And we're like, we can't just make the whole show all about that. But that is what's there. And I'm sure that we'll have more Wade Christofferson, because obviously, yes. Isn't that correct, RFM, that within the next year, some steps will be taken? He'll be in front of a judge. We'll get some more information.
Frequently.
Yeah.
Or at least regularly.
I would think
he'll be in front of a judge.
Yep.
Although most of those won't matter very much, and it'll probably end up being a plea, and he'll be sent off to, well, I don't know. He should be sent off to prison on what would effectively be a life sentence. But I don't know. If he has not been in the criminal system before, then he may qualify for a special sentencing alternative where he does treatment in lieu of a sentence like that. May have to do some time in jail, which you'd get credit for what time he's already serving. So it could end up like that as well.
Well, we'll be here to cover it, I guess.
Yeah. All right. Well, Happy New Year, everybody. We really, it really boils down to a gratitude for you, the fans, the followers, the listeners, the viewers. We do this show for you, and we create all this content in this space to help bring you the information so that you can be entertained by Mormonism and make the best decisions about how you navigate this crazy thing called the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and Mormonism more generally. Happy New Year to all of you. Happy New Year at Radio Free Mormon. Happy New Year, Rebecca Biblioteca. Kudos to you guys for all that you do. And folks, have a great New Year. Be safe. Don't drink and drive, and have a ton of fun. Bye-bye.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everybody.
That's a wrap for this week's edition of the Mormon Newscast. We appreciate you tuning in and sharing this time with us. Keep the conversation going and stay informed on all things Mormonism. Until next week, wishing you peace and joy. See you next Monday at 6 p.m. on the Mormon Newscast.